to our Sunday program today. Today we're very excited and honored that our Sunday class is going to be given by His Grace Kanhai Gopal Prabhu. Kanhai Gopal Prabhu, as many of you know, and him and his wife were active members of our congregation online and in person when they were here in Austin. They're both based out of College Station now. Kanhai Gopal Prabhu is a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, and Kanhai Gopal Prabhu was introduced to Krishna consciousness, I believe, when you were at a base camp in Mumbai, right, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji.
So Kanhai Gopal Prabhu has been practicing Krishna consciousness for many decades. Last time the class he gave was such a fantastic class on going deeper into your Krishna consciousness. It, at least on me personally, left a very lasting impression on how important it is for us to not just go look at our Krishna consciousness on a peripheral level, but actually go deeper and experience it powerfully. So we're very excited to hear today from Kanhai Gopal Prabhu in the next class that he's giving at our Sunday Sangha. And today, Kanhai Gopal Prabhu will be speaking from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verse 16. So we're very happy and excited. And Kanhai Gopal Prabhu, over to you.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. I would like to welcome all the devotees for this online association. Even though it is so difficult, but still devotees are making it, and it is very encouraging. And I would also seek the blessings of all the senior devotees, in fact, all the devotees on the call, so that we can discuss something worthwhile and meaningful, and hopefully apply it in our lives, and hopefully our spiritual lives become better with this. So we will start with the invocation prayers, then we will move on to the verse. We'll read the translation, we'll read the purport. I'll probably ask for a volunteer or two to read the lines from the purport, and then we'll move on to our discussion for today. So let's start. And I'm sharing my screen. Do let me know if you can see the prayers. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapidam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajata Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I will just share the presentation next, and then we can read the verse. And okay, is the presentation visible?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna. So today we will read from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verse number 16. Manah prasada saumyatvam maunam atma vinigraha bhava samshuddhir iti etat tapo manasamuchyate. And satisfaction simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. I'll repeat the translation once again. And satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. We'll read the purport, and I think I've split it in 2 or 3, but let's take one volunteer per slide if anyone would like to read it.
I can read it.
Yes, Prabhu.
The purport: to make the mind austere is to detach it from sense gratification. It should be so trained that it can be always thinking of doing good for others. Best training for the mind is gravity in thought. One should not deviate from Krishna consciousness and must always avoid sense gratification. To purify one's nature is to become Krishna conscious.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Is there something more?
Yes, that's the
Okay.
next.
Satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from thoughts of sense enjoyment. The more we think of sense enjoyment, the more the mind becomes dissatisfied. In the present age, we unnecessarily engage the mind in so many different ways for sense gratification, and so there is no possibility of the mind's becoming satisfied.
And I think we'll need one more volunteer for the last part of the purport.
Course, sorry, somebody else.
Okay, sure, Prabhuji. Okay. The best course is to divert the mind to the Vedic literature, which is full of satisfying stories, as in the Puranas and the Mahabharata. One can take advantage of this knowledge and thus become purified. The mind should be devoid of duplicity, and one should think of the welfare of all. Silence means that one is always thinking of self-realization. The person in Krishna consciousness observes perfect silence in this sense. Control of the mind means detaching the mind from sense enjoyment. One should be straightforward in his dealings and thereby purify his existence. All these qualities together constitute austerity in mental activities. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you for reading the purports. So let's go back to the translation once again. Satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. So this is like one of the most important parts and verses in the Bhagavad Gita. And the thing that we will be focusing on today is purification of one's existence. More specifically, we will focus on purity, why it is important, how we can achieve it in our lives, and what can be the results of achieving purity in our life. And purification of one's existence, actually, it also comes, the Lord mentions this again, like not again, but before this, it was mentioned in the 16th chapter, actually, I think in between verses 1 to 3. And purity is such an important principle in our spiritual life, right? So let's talk about why it is so important, right? So let's just jump a couple slides ahead. Why, right? So the first thing that comes to my mind right now, there are literally, again, like Srila Prabhupada's books are filled with reasons why we need to purify our existence and be Krishna conscious. But the first thing that comes to my mind as I wrote down these points was we want to pass the quality control. So I was able to relate this with my job a couple years ago when I was working. So we were in a testing team, and our job was, when we make computer chips, we want to make sure that the processors going to the customer are not bad. So every time we test the processor, we have to make sure everything in it works. Imagine getting a laptop or a mobile phone, and you try to turn it on, it doesn't turn on, right? Or maybe you enter the enter key and all it does is do the function of a space key, right? We want to make sure nothing bad goes out of our factories to the customer. Similarly, the Lord's expert quality control in the quality control manager of the material world is Maya Devi. She is testing us to see if we have any of those material desires in any form left in our hearts. And if we have that, we'll simply end up in the reject pile, in the recycle. Uh, um, we are trying to there are so many innovative ways to recycle things of this world, but Krishna's amazing material nature has the best recycling mechanism. It keeps us recycling from birth to birth. We birth, old age, disease, death, recycle, go into something else, right? It keeps us recycling through so many shapes and forms, trying to satisfy these desires that we have. So if we are not pure enough, we will not pass the quality control. We will always fall in the trap of Maya Devi trying to tempt us with something other than Krishna. And Krishna is actually waiting and watching, and he's also trying to help through so many different ways. So that's the first reason, right? The other reason I was thinking about is Cheto Darpana Marjanam, right? In this verse of Shikshashtakam, this is the first verse, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu starts with Cheto Darpana Marjanam. We have to clean the mirror of our consciousness, right? We have to clean it. Why? So that towards the end, it's Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, Patipadam Purnamrita Aswadanam. So that at the end of it, we can immerse ourselves in the nectarian ocean, right? Anandam Ambudhi, Ambuda, ocean, right? Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadam. So that at every step of our lives, we can actually relish the nectar of Krishna consciousness. And that is why, one more reason we have to purify ourselves, right? The third most important reason is that Krishna, he sees our character in whatever we do, in whatever we try to offer him or his devotees. Krishna sees the intention with which we do things for him, right? A Vaishnava is a Saragrahi, is the essence seeker, and Krishna is a Bhavagrahi, or he looks at your intention, right? And it is a beautiful combination of the Saragrahi Vaishnava and the Bhavagrahi Lord that makes spiritual life beautiful, right? But the Lord is actually looking at what is actually going on in our heart, right? So this is like one of the most old like sayings, and everybody has heard it, right? But for us as devotees, it's like one of the most important things, right? That if wealth is lost, nothing is lost. If health is lost, something is lost. But if character is lost, everything is lost, right? We have it today, it's topsy-turvy. But at least as devotees, we can try to focus on our character and try to purify ourselves, right? With pure intentions and with pure hearts, we can actually approach Krishna, right? So in line with that, I was also thinking about this point, is that we want to establish a relationship with Krishna and his devotees, right? And I was thinking how this saying about wealth is lost, nothing is lost, and health is lost, something is lost. That's an old saying, like, and I think that quote was made based on what was valuable to some people at a particular point in time, and how values shifted to something else, right? So also I was thinking, what is valuable to people in today's world, right? That when relationships are lost, a lot of the times, and now this may not be a universal quote, like only Krishna can speak universal things, right? But however, so much of this is happening in our world today that we can sometimes feel that when relationships are lost, nothing is lost. People are willing to cut people off from lives like at the snap of a finger. And fun and enjoyment is lost, then something is lost. People start worrying, man, I'm getting miserable, I don't have anything to do, let me try to do some things, I want to explore the world, let me go out, have some fun and enjoyment. And when fame or adoration, distinction, and power and prestige is lost, everything is lost. Whereas we should have it the other way. you know when pride, prestige, fame, adoration, distinction, these things are lost, it should not matter to us that much, right? That is not the goal of our life, right? When fun and enjoyment is lost, something is lost. We cannot be miserable all the time. But if relationships are lost, then everything should be lost. For a devotee who's striving to establish the relationship with Krishna, that's the most important thing in a devotee's life. It should become the most important thing in a devotee's life. So establishing a relationship with Krishna and his devotees. And we cannot establish a clean relationship with the Lord and his devotees if our hearts are not pure. So we should be thinking in those terms, right? That is the reason we need to develop purity. We have to overcome our toxic individualism and try to help each other, right? So that we can develop really satisfying relationships. The other thing that comes to mind is that we want to thrive in our devotional service and not just survive, right? um I so I'm very scared of water. Like, I cannot really swim, and I don't know that is something since my birth. So one time I went with my I was doing internship at my company, and they organized an event of all the interns, let's go kayaking and in the river downtown. And I was so scared of water. I was trying to avoid it by all means, but I also had to make sure that I do not look like the odd one out. So I just went ahead with the team, and hoping that some people will try to save me if I fall off the kayak or something. And every time a little bit wind would come, and I would just oh my god, I'm going to fall down, and I'm going to drown. Okay, oh, please Krishna, save me. And singing Narsimha Arti in the most devotional way, right? And every little wave of the water would scare me, right? And at the end of it, we spent a couple hours in the river, and everyone came out, and I was like, just as I stepped out of the kayak, and I was like, oh my god, thank you Lord, you saved me. I did not fall off the kayak, or I did not fall into the water. And I am so relieved that this experience is over now, right? So that experience is a survival experience. There is no fun, there is no joy in that, and at every step there is a fear and frustration. So we cannot live our spiritual lives in that state. If we are in that state in our spiritual lives, then we need to correct something. And to the degree our hearts are unclean, to the degree our consciousness is not pure, we will be operating in a survival mechanism. We want to operate in the thrive mechanism, right? When I was a little kid, we would watch shows on Discovery Channel, and we would see all these people, doing, rafting, and people who enjoy different sports. Like, you can see a person who is thriving in something, they can come and tell you each moment of the activity in such great detail, because they have relished each moment, they have relished each challenge. Even if they were challenged, even if they went through difficulties in those activities, they will come and they'll be able to tell you, and then I did this, and then I just turned a little to the left, and I did that. And it's, you can see the difference by the way they speak. So we want to thrive and not survive, and for that we need to purify our hearts. And also in this is that we want to avoid offenses. We don't want to commit aparadhas, because it is frustrating to come out of a repeated cycle of fall downs and coming back to spiritual life again. And such a cycle is also very frustrating. So we want to, you know, relish these principle of thriving in our spiritual lives. So that is why. And recently I came across His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's verse. He has these Gita daily meditations of like 3 or 4 minutes that he releases also on YouTube. But this one was really profound and it affected me. And so I noted it down, right? If we cover our external tracks, nobody will come to know. But the tracks we create internally will bury us. And it was so profound that we can actually make a show and, you know, try to, you know, we can make a mistake. Nobody will come to know in our own private room, right? In our own place where there are no devotees around us. But each of those acts are creating tracks internally, and they will bury us, and they will bury our spiritual consciousness. They will bury our desire to be spiritual. So that is why it is so important to keep working on ourselves and, you know, try not to do those things that will actually bury us spiritually. So these are some of the reasons I was thinking why we should be working on purifying our existence, right? So when the whys are actually done, we should think about, okay, that's fine. So how do we proceed with this? Like, what should we fix in our consciousness, right? Let's try to talk about certain practical points that we can do as devotees, and we actually do, but hearing them again reinforces those values. So number 1 is purifying our body, right? We should be physically clean, right? We have so many Vaishnava etiquettes. If anyone on the call doesn't have that, you can maybe ask Ma Sundari Mataji. There are so many Vaishnava etiquettes that one can implement in their lives to gradually purify themselves, even physically, right? We have so many rituals, right? So we should have clean habits, right? If we are very simple examples, right? We should be at least, I think in civilized world, one doesn't need to be told to shower daily, right? At least shower before you approach the Lord or the devotees or the temple, right? These are things that are common sense, right? But one should keep in mind the cleanliness principle, it is progressive, right? It goes from the body and it goes from the body. Whatever you do with your body, it affects your mind, it affects your consciousness, right? And it affects your spiritual life. So Tilak, very simple principle, right? We sing in the Mangalarti, right? Shringaratan Mandiram Arjanado, right? We should be purifying our body. Apply tilak, right? It's the glories of actually tilak were very expertly described by, I forgot the name of the Mataji, but she actually wrote an entire article on in the Back to Godhead magazine. And I wasn't able to find it out, but if I can, I'll try to find it out and share the link on the group. But it is so important, right? It changes your consciousness. Even if you have the tendency to do the wrong things, just by the presence of tilak on your body, it can change your thoughts. It can restrain you from doing the wrong things, right? As much as possible, we should always apply tilak. I remember when we were living in base and Baldev Prabhu would tell us, you know, what happens in the brahmachari ashram. And very senior devotee in the brahmachari ashram would actually go and chastise brahmacharis if they would not have tilak on them. You know, it's like, why are you going around, walking around like a widow? You know, like a widow doesn't have sindoor in her head. And we are devotees. That is our Lord's marking on our body, right? So we should keep tilak on our body. It keeps our consciousness, uh, you know, towards Krishna all the day, as much as practically possible, right? I'm not asking you to put tilak and go to Walmart. If you can, that is wonderful. But if you cannot, that is fine. But as long as you are in your personal practices, you can apply these things. It is a small thing, yet it is very profound, and it can change your consciousness, right? So tilakam, right? Going to and residing in and offering obeisances in holy places, right? This one of the very most important items of devotional service is actually residing in a holy dham, right? I think it is mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Dham is a place where actually the Lord has performed his pastimes, right? And his devotees have been glorifying his pastimes and his devotees since time immemorial, right? But also we should remember this verse, right? Narad Muni is asking Lord Vishnu, where do you reside, right? Naham tishtami vaikunthe yoginam hridayeshuva tatra tishtami narada yad gayanti mad bhakta. Means I do not reside in Vaikuntha. I do not reside in the hearts of the great yogis and sages, right? I reside where my devotees are singing my glories. Yad Gayanti Mad Bhakta, where my devotees are singing my glories. So any place where the Lord's glories are being sung is a holy place, right? Just by offering obeisances, one's body gets purified, right? One can actually go to the holy places and offer obeisances. I have literally seen devotees rolling in the holy dirt of Vrindavan, right? Collecting the dust, holy dust, and keeping it with them, right? Remembering the Lord that way and purifying their body. So physically, yes, these are the things we can do, right? There are some more things we can do to purify ourselves, our body, physically. As much as possible, we as devotees, we should be doing this, is accepting prasadam only. Accept only what is offered to the Lord, right? As we have this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, very exclusively the Lord says, Yagya Shishta Shina Santo Buchyante Sarvakil Vishay Bhunjate Te Tvagam Papa Ye Pachanti Atma Karanat, right? The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for their personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin, right? And it is logical, right? We should accept only what is offered to the Lord as much as possible, as much as practically possible. Um, and it is a very purifying principle, right? Physically, it nourishes the body and it nourishes the soul, the spirit soul, right? So, and again, the Lord mentions in the 17th chapter, 14th verse, just the two verses about this, right? Is Devadvija Guru Pragya Pujanam Shocham Arjavam Brahmacharyam Ahimsa Cha Shariram Tapa Uchyate, right? We have to perform austerities. Austerities are extremely powerful detoxifiers, if I'm allowed to use that word, right? They detoxify you from the proclivities to commit sinful activities. Of course, too much austerity also is not recommended, right? But it is allowed as per the words of the Shastras, right? And the Lord is describing some austerities of the body here in the 14th verse, right? What does he say? Austerity of the body consists in worship of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmanas, the spiritual master, and superiors like father and mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and non-violence, right? Such profound principles, simple yet very powerful, right? And we should try to do these little austerities here and there, right? Waking up in the morning, trying to chant as early as possible in the morning. These are very simple austerities of the body that everybody can do, right? And especially holy months like the Purushottam month or the Kartik month, right? These are very powerful months to actually perform very little austerities. Like these are not profound austerities that maybe Hiranyakashipu or Ravan did, for thousands of years. And we are not trying to do those things, but we are trying to do things that will purify our consciousness, right? So purification of the body, right? It actually also progresses as purification of the mind, right? So that's the next component of what we should purify. We should purify our minds. Again, as we said, austerities, right? This particular verse is what we are talking about. Austerity. If performing austerity purifies and cleans you, right? What are the austerities being talked about in this verse? Satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, right? Purification of one's existence. These are the things that will actually purify the mind. Mm. Um, and then it actually strengthens the mind. And I remember one example that I heard, and I found it to be very relevant, because the mind sometimes can be nasty and obnoxious, right? And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says, and I'll try to paraphrase what I've heard, but I'll paraphrase it and then I'll explain. So he says that one should beat one's mind with a broom in the morning after waking up, and with shoes before going to the bed, before sleeping at night. And so the thing that I'm not sure about is when to use the broom and when to use the shoes. But this quote I've heard in a couple of lectures, and I found it to be very interesting. It doesn't literally mean that you should make yourself miserable, but one should know and understand that the conditioned mind is extremely powerful. And the tendency of the mind is to always keep us in a comfort zone, in a situation and spot where we don't have to do anything. And, we just can tell ourselves this is nice. But every time we try to do a little bit of austerity, the mind becomes uncomfortable, right? It's like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Why are you doing this? Okay. And it will start, there'll be a tug of war. But an intelligence, strong intelligence can actually overcome the mind. But that is the essence of the point here. Like, beat the mind, try to calm it down, try to use all different forms of Sam, Dam, Dandabhed with the mind to actually make sure that we can purify the desires, right? So that's how we can purify the mind through all these points, right? And the next component that we should purify is our intelligence, right? How do we purify our intelligence? The most powerful and potent form of purifying our intelligence is through studying scriptures, Shastra Adhyayan. It is such an important principle. We hear such wonderful talks from such great personalities, and their lives is a testimony to the fact how powerful purified intelligence can be, right? When we hear His Grace Amarendra Prabhu, or if we hear His Grace Gauranga Prabhu, or if we hear these Shastric scholars Hari Parshad Prabhu or Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, these people, we can see from these devotees' lives how much they have accomplished in the service of the Lord, right? So, and each of them, one of their guiding principles of their sadhana is studying scriptures. And it is incredibly powerful, right? And it is an incredibly powerful tool to control the mind. So studying scriptures is very important, right? And it is very important for all the devotees. Each of us should have some form of studying scriptures every day. If not every day, try to put it every alternate day. If not every alternate day, try to put it once a week at least. It is extremely important that we study Srila Prabhupada's books with thoroughly, right? And that is the way to purify intelligence. The other way we can purify our intelligence is meditate on the instructions of the spiritual master, or meditate on the instructions of the saintly people, right? Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. We can hear from them. We can hear from them and try to write down lessons that we have learned and try to implement them. Put it on a sticky note and place it on your work, on your desktop, at your home, right? Near your laptop, wherever we can, right? And it is important to do these things because it purifies our intelligence. The other component that remains to be purified, and that's the most difficult component to purify, and it takes years, it takes lifetimes to actually purify the false ego, right? And what is the way to purify the false ego? By actually renouncing the false ego in one sense, by surrendering to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, by surrendering to the Supreme Lord, by accepting becoming a humble menial servant of the spiritual master. right? Easily said, but very, very, very difficult to do, right? Because false ego is the prime foundation of material life, and it's the most difficult to break, but it is possible. The solution, it is simple to state and difficult to implement, but it is possible, right? The other thing is serving in the association of devotees. It is such an important factor. That is at least one of the things that I learned early on in my life, is serving in the association of devotees can be humbling. One has to, be tolerant. One has to always give the benefit of doubt, not criticize, um, and always try to serve the devotees. And it is an incredible purifying tool for the false ego. And believe me, as a materialist would be miserable in such a situation, but a devotee is incredibly blissful in these things, right? Because we have the right consciousness, we have the right attitudes, right? And that is why these things will purify us, right? So these are the things that I could think of, is that we should be working constantly on purifying, right? Um, what is the result of actually such a purification, right? Um, Before that, actually, I would like to point out this particular paragraph from a purport that I was reading recently. And it struck me because Srila Prabhupada points out so many other things that we could be doing to purify our consciousness, right? And this is from Srimad-Bhagavatam, first canto, 9th chapter, 27th verse, right? And I think this was from Bhishma's passing away from this world, right? One has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice, and bewilderment to get freedom from anger. Now, these are literally Prabhupada's words. I've just put them in bullet points, right? To get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive. Very purifying. It is one of the most, I would say, mentally releasing, all the negativities, forgiveness. So it's a very important principle, right? To get freedom from anger, one should learn one should learn how to forgive. To be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans. Yeah, it is so easily stated, and it is actually a very practical solution. To get free from unlawful desires, stop making plans and engage in something more positive, right? By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance only can one conquer desires and avarice. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. By self-control, one can be free from false hopes, and money can be saved by avoiding undesirable association. Right? By practicing of yoga, one can control hunger, and worldliness can be avoided by culturing knowledge of impermanence. So Srila Prabhupada has sprinkled, these practical tips throughout his purports in his books. And it is amazing when we come across such things and try to remember and practice these things. So the result of purity is that it reflects at three levels. It reflects in our thoughts. Our thoughts become purified. Our thoughts become Krishna conscious. And those eventually lead to our words becoming Krishna conscious. And eventually it leads to our actions becoming Krishna conscious. And it is a simple progression. It is reflected in a person's dealings with the devotees and with everyone around them. And it is reflected in a person's character, and it is seen in one's behavior. Right? Srila Prabhupada, I'm just recollecting one more thing that Srila Prabhupada said, is that what is also a pure person's behavior or attitude, right? Matravat, he would quote Chanakya Pandit so often. And this is like, I've heard a lot and read a lot in purports and articles. Matravat paradarishu paradravyeshu loshtravat Atmavat sarva bhuteshu yah pashyati sa pandita. Matravat pardareshu means one who sees the wife of another man as his mother. Loshtravat pardravyeshu, one who sees someone else's property as stool. And Atmavat sarva bhuteshu, one who treats others as they would treat themselves, as oneself, right? That is a true saintly person. So this will be seen in a person's behavior, right? That is also one more indication of a person's purity. So I was thinking, as acronyms help me a lot in remembering things, and they are easy to remember, and and at really difficult and important times, sometimes you can remember them. So I was thinking of what we could actually do to be pure, and I was trying to stuff some practical tips into an acronym, and let's talk about that. So P, postpone sense gratification, right? To achieve purity, we are all sadhakas, we are all in the anartha nivritti stage of our sadhana, right? So many desires will come in our hearts, and it is so difficult. So I was talking to one devotee, actually I got this idea from him only, and I really like this idea. It's like, Prabhu, if I ever think of something, if I ever get an idea of I want to do this or do that, all I do is I just try to postpone it, and I think let me just do these things today and I will think about it tomorrow. And I keep postponing it until that desire isn't even strong. So many times when we get non-Krishna conscious desires, we, or due to some or the other situation in our life, we postpone the practice of Krishna consciousness and prioritize sense gratification. But postponing sense gratification can be very powerful too. Just try to reverse it. Okay, let me do this. Let me read Bhagavatam first. Let me chant my rounds first. Let me, get some association with devotees. I'll do these things later, and try to push it back as much as possible. One more example I remember is Maharaj mentioning, I think this was originally shared by Bhakti Maharaj probably. But it is a very powerful example of an African proverb, right? Every heart has a good dog and a bad dog, right? And there is a competition between the good dog and the bad dog, and both are barking for your attention, right? But which dog will bark the most? It is the one we feed the most, right? So we have to feed the good dog, right? We keep feeding the good dog, starve the bad dog. Eventually, it will lose its strength and die, right? And we don't mind the death of a bad. This is just not literal. So, but still, we don't mind that. We want the good dog to survive, and not only survive, to thrive. So that is why we should postpone sense gratification. If those desires are there, just push it back for another day, for another time, for another year, and then just forget about it. Understand the urgent need of Krishna consciousness. This I was hearing in a lecture, and Maharaj was mentioning that how when Srila Prabhupada was there, devotees, when the books would come out, would devour like the words, right, and absorb each word with so much urgency. We really need to understand that Krishna consciousness is an urgent need in our lives. Look at the world around us. Look at the state of everything. Look at the state of the nations, states, cities, communities, families. Look at the state of individuals. If we understand the urgent need of Krishna consciousness, we will take the message so seriously, and we will start working on ourselves. Maharaj was mentioning one of the things that when he was working as a pujari in New Vrindavan temple, New Vrindavan community, he would barely get time to sleep. And he was mentioning that he read Srila Prabhupada's books walking. He would walk back and forth so that he wouldn't fall asleep. And that way he read so many of the books of Srila Prabhupada, right? One very great example is Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. He took the message of Srila Prabhupada so seriously, and yet his practice of Krishna consciousness was so strong because these souls have understood the urgent need of the message and the urgent need to implement in their lives, right? There's so many great examples that are actually coming in my head. Ladani Mataji, if devotees haven't read the book The Legacy of Love, do read it. Read about the life of Ladani Mataji. See how these people have actually taken the message of Krishna consciousness with so much urgency in their lives and changed their entire life and of so many others around them, right? So we should understand it is urgent, it is important, and it is urgent, and it gets the topmost priority, right? The other thing is, right your wrongs. We make so many mistakes in our devotional lives. We should accept those mistakes, and we should try to fix them in whatever way possible, right? Because if we try to cover them up, they resurface again and again in our lives in so many ways. And Krishna will keep testing us until we fix those things. There is no easy escape. There is no hiding them, as they say, like brushing it under the carpet. We cannot. We have to right our wrongs. Whatever mistakes we have done, we have to fix them, right? And the last is that we have to embark on this journey to establish a daily practice of purifying oneself, right? Don't wait, don't be confused, don't, and if you have already started, don't stop. I back, like, when I started my engineering, I read this quote in this programming book. I don't know the source of the author, but it was very, very unique and important. It says, most things I needed to know in life, before I could do them, I learned them by doing them, So to approach Krishna and his devotees needs ultimate purity of heart, the pinnacle of purity that a person can achieve. So approach Krishna, purity is needed, but we can only achieve that purity by actually embarking on the process of purification. And by trying to approach Krishna, we gradually get purified. And once we get purified, we can genuinely, truly, in the real spirit, approach Krishna. So these are some principles that I thought are important for us in our spiritual life, and try to achieve purity. But the word embark also reminded me of someone who was thinking about the same thing about the people of this world. And he embarked on a journey to purify so many fallen souls, right? And that person is none other than our Srila Prabhupada, right? Let's go back to 18th of September 1965, right? Srila Prabhupada wrote this beautiful poem. He poured out his heart in this beautiful poem called Markine Bhagavata Dharma. And in that he has expressed the difficult mission of purifying this conditioned souls of this world, especially when he arrived and looked at the skyline of Boston. He was feeling so compassionate towards the conditioned souls, right? And I will just share some verses from his poem that are so very profound, and he shares such a hope for the purification of conditioned souls of this world. And changed it to my browser so we can, right? Okay, right? So Srila Prabhupada, he starts, right? Boro kripa koile Krishna adhamira prati kila giya nile heta koro ebe gati, right? We can read the translation. Actually, we'll read straight away from the translation. That will help us. My dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Now you can do whatever you like with me, right? I guess you have some business here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place, right? Look at Srila Prabhupada's, he is quickly noting, right? Most of the population here is covered with material modes of ignorance and passion. Absorbed in material life, they think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore they have no taste for transcendental message of Vasudeva. There, I do not know how they will be able to understand it, right? But then eventually, Srila Prabhupada, the transcendental genius that he is, right? He knows the solution to that, right? And then in the 8th verse, he then says, the words of Srimad-Bhagavatam in your incarnation. And if a sober person repeatedly receives it, the key is repeatedly receiving it with submissive oral reception, then he will be able to understand your message. And then he points out, this is, devotees, we all should mark these verses down and write them in our heart to know that our purification is happening, is gradual, and we should know what is going to come in the process of purification, right? These are 4 verses from the 2nd chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, right? And we recite a lot of these verses. And I would have recited the verse, but let's read the translation. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, he cleanses, we see, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted, right? So what happens when we start hearing the glories of Krishna? Um, uh, he cleanses the desire for material enjoyment. That's purification, right? By regular attendance in the classes on Bhagavatam and by rendering the service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. And then there is further progression, but I would recommend devotees go through these 4 verses, try to remember them, try to write them down. And remember, this progression of purification is gradual. But as Srila Prabhupada, he wrote these lines, he had no idea. In one sense, externally, we can see that there was no Krishna consciousness movement, right? But just on the faith of these words, he transformed and purified the lives of so many, right? And likewise, all we have to do is just accept this message, and give our best try. Give our best try until the last breath of our life. If we can do that, then our lives will be successful, right? And that is the importance of purity. And I think we can stop our discussion here and probably go through some questions and answers or comments if devotees have.
Okay, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Kanhai Gopal Prabhu. Prabhu, were you still sharing something? I wasn't sure.
No, I think I stopped sharing.
Okay. Sorry, it's like loading for me slowly here. Thank you so much, Kanhai Gopal Prabhu, for that wonderful, wonderful class. Every time you give class, I'm excited for new acronyms. It is like, just as the way Chaitanya Charan Prabhu has his one-line hitters, I think you're going to start getting the reputation for acronym creation. So last time, we heard deep, and this time we heard pure. So looking forward to hearing the next acronym that we will get to hear from you. Any comments or questions, devotees, at this time? You could either post it in the chat, or if you would like to, you just use the reactions to raise your hand so we can call upon you here on Zoom to ask a question. So Prabhu, I can start. I had one question and a comment. The question I had was, you were speaking about the pure thing, postponement of sense gratification, right? Sometimes in a practical way, it might be a little difficult to postpone necessarily, right? Because timing is everything. So say, for example, I have a desire to want to like do well at my work, right? Which to me, to some degree, is a bit of sense gratification. Not really also because you use that in Krishna service, but there is a bit of sense like I want to do good at work. If I postpone it, then there might be a moment where I'm actually losing out an opportunity to do something that in the long term could be beneficial in Krishna consciousness. So could you help understand how postponement, but there's also a time to do it, how do both of those two come in place?
Okay, but just to understand your question correctly, you mentioned, I couldn't catch the fact that you said doing good at work to be counted as sense gratification?
Yes, Prabhu, because is it first of all, would that be considered a sense gratification?
Okay.
And then if it is, then how do you postpone that because you need to actually do good at work to kind of have a job in this time at least?
Okay, I think I will speak the principle that I've heard. The principle is that we are trying to do everything as a service for Krishna. So if the progress in our jobs, if the progress in our professional careers can be utilized as a service to Krishna, we should do it. But the things that I was referring to as a sense gratification, maybe I should have worded it more accurately. I was referring to things that are specifically detrimental to our Krishna consciousness. And the things that are detrimental to our Krishna consciousness are breaking the regulative principles, associating with non-devotees, and so many other things that we have talked about. So we have our do's and don'ts. But one has to figure it out based on their own, circumstance as to what is best in terms of avoiding sense gratification. And I think sometimes it just needs a little help from someone more mature than us and trying to figure out those things. But considering one's progress in one's job, like there is no straight and direct answer to count that as sense gratification or not. Depends on how one approaches their life.
Thank you, Prabhu.
You could have some points, Mataji, in your own thoughts. Maybe you could share some.
Yeah, Prabhu, I think it's a great answer. I think that's a good clarification on detrimental, like postponing things that are detrimental, because very often we get caught in this trap where some things that you actually really need to do, we tend to ignore because we think, oh, that is sense gratification, right? But I like the point that you just mentioned, that I think it's important to postpone things that are detrimental, but because some of the things can be dovetailed to Krishna legitimately, right? Because how you look at sense gratification is very perspective. Is there like work is a good example. You could look at work as a sense gratification, or you could look at it as a service to Krishna. Exercise is another good thing, like taking care of your body, right? Like it could be a form of, well, if I'm going to spend like 4 hours in the gym and not chant or not be able to do this, then it is absolutely sense gratification. But if I'm spending 4 hours working out, but I'm still able to keep my Krishna consciousness going, then is it really detrimental? Do I need to postpone it? Probably not. So I think that's a really good point about how detrimental is this to our Krishna consciousness. So thank you for sharing that. I see Vaikuntesha Balaji Prabhu has his hand up for a question, and then Lalita Madhvi had a question. So maybe we'll start with Vaikuntesha Balaji Prabhu, then we'll do Lalita Madhvi, and I'm seeing a question from Sakshi Garam Prabhu and Mridakshi Mataji. So Vaikuntesha Balaji Prabhu, please go ahead.
Prabhu, thank you so much for nice enlightening talk. You point out so many things that we need to address in our lives, and yes, that but they are difficult, like you mentioned it. I was also wondering about how about chanting the Mahamantra? Does that also purify? I mean, that is one of the things that Prabhupada is, stresses of chanting the fixed number of rounds, and that will also purify. Do these things go together, or can we just do one thing at a time, or what do you feel about that?
Prabhu, I think you all are more qualified. Everyone who's asking me a question is, I think, more qualified than I am to answer the questions, but we'll definitely discuss one point at a time. So when you say all these things go together, what are you counting with chanting, Prabhu? Are you counting?
Once I asked this question to one of the devotees of Srila Prabhupada, and he was saying, I said that, do we have to work everything together? Like just chanting, is it enough or not enough? Or do you have to also try, of course, you want to reduce your sense gratification, you want to do this, do that. All that will help together when you chant. That was his answer.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think you also stated the answer. I think it's not what I think, but what I've heard is, so I was listening to His Grace Radha Gopinath Prabhu in a Bhagavatam class, and he was mentioning about the prayers of Prahlada Maharaj, and Narasimhadev telling him that that all his past 7 or 14 generations have been liberated. And sometimes we start thinking, now that I've become a devotee, all these my past and future generations have become liberated. And but the thing is, are we like Prahlad, right? So if we are like Shri Prahlad Maharaj, then everything else, the benedictions that are in the Bhagavatam for becoming a devotee, hold true for us. Similarly, chanting in itself is sufficient when done correctly in the right spirit. However, we are not at that stage. And that is why we have, Srila Prabhupada has expertly designed this entire regime of Krishna consciousness, of getting up in the morning, doing Mangalarti, hearing Bhagavatam class, chanting our rounds, serving the devotees, reading Shastras. And we need all of those things to gradually purify us from all directions, assume you have a large, in Chowpatty temple, sometimes there would be Sunday feast, like thousands of devotees come to honor prasadam and feast, and there are these huge vessels, and sometimes the pipe that we would have to put water on it is not actually enough to completely clean the vessel at once. So we start working sides, right? We start from all. So for us also, my understanding is that we have to work from all sides to purify all these things, so that we can chant the holy name in a pure state of consciousness at least once before we die, I think. And that is why we have all these things, so that we can achieve that. And the means is the end as well for us. So I don't know if that helps you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it is working everything together. And like you mentioned it, you have to chant purely, and that state we haven't reached. That's a very good point. It takes time to chant purely. And thank you very much for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Wonderful answer. Lalita Madhvi, you had a question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. It was such a wonderful class. Really amazing. And the question Prabhuji asked and your answer was also really perfect. Hare Krishna. My question is something in extension with what Mahasundari asked, that sense gratification, right? Like sometimes we watch movies, I do with my kids, and they play video games, right? And I feel that if we want us to, and this is solely my opinion, that if I want them to be able to connect to the world outside, so that they have opportunity to preach in the future, I think they need to be almost one of them. If not, I'm not saying that they should go and, go to the bars or like that, but at least have the knowledge of what is going on in the society. They have a common ground to talk to kids, connect with other kids. Hey, did you watch this movie? How did you, those kind of. So what is your, what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts about this?
Mataji, I have no experience with kids, but fortunately,
Hare Krishna. Hopefully soon, Prabhuji.
We are getting you ready, Prabhu.
No, but I think it is such an important point for our devotee children that to know and be aware of the things in our society that are happening around us, and to have a common ground to talk to people around us, especially when we are growing up, to try to strike friendships, with just the common people. But I would just revert to the point that we discussed in another class, that there is entertainment and there is enlightenment. Each of these things in today's world is creating a paradigm in the receiver's consciousness. The more we put our time and energy in, either of those things, the more our mind and our consciousness becomes inclined towards those things. So, Mataji, there is a principle. Again, there is no black or white solution. But as long as our entertainment or our sense gratification is regulated, it is fine. But the moment it starts hampering our enlightenment, hampering our Krishna consciousness, that is the stage where it has become problematic. And with each parent has to be the judge of what can be regulated for their kids, what their tendencies are, what their inclinations are. And there are ways to Krishnaize their desires. But however, some exposure will eventually happen, because we also need to understand this, that I was talking to another devotee, and he mentioned a very beautiful point to me, is that in the previous ages, a student would spend his childhood, his or her childhood, like his childhood at the Gurukul under the tutelage of a spiritual master. But then upon graduation, the spiritual master, with the faith on the teachings that they have given to the student, will let the student go, and let them decide what they want to do based on the faith of the teachings. So also we should also have the faith in the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, because those are genuine teachings. Those are genuine heart transformations. But Mataji, exactly what amount of hours of cinema or video games are harmful or beneficial is changing, like different from person to person. Some other devotees who have more practical experience and maturity about this can also share, but these are the principles that I think in my head. And Mataji, what to speak about kids, this is the thing that I have also tried to keep for myself, right? We all go out, and the enticement of everything else out there is very strong. So this is also the principle that I try to keep for myself.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Can I just add something to your
Sure,
answer? This is a wonderful answer. Just something practical that happened in my life, growing up was I think it's, I grew up in a Krishna conscious family, and my parents obviously were not very strict in terms of what they restricted me to do, what not to do. But one of the things that I came to realize is that when you actually go more into kind of what you said in your previous class, when you actually start getting deeper into Krishna consciousness, even at a young age, automatically the other things start to go away. So it's it really reminds me of the point Prabhupada emphasized, when we read Leelamrita, Prabhupada did not start with 4 regulative principles. His early disciples were initiated without following 4 regulative principles. But when they saw, the more serious they got, the more they saw Srila Prabhupada, naturally the interest kind of start to wane away. And I think that's a really nice thing, I kind of feel is a good principle, is that when you increase your enlightenment point of it, then what you need entertainment from naturally decreases, because you just, first of all, we just don't have time. But secondly, like you don't get that same amount of joy that you would have gotten some time back while doing this. So I don't think it's so much of like, especially like, I mean, I like, at least I look at it from a teenager's perspective, you know, working with them. I don't think it's stopping, but it's like, what do you add on to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you add on to it, you naturally see like, it's so, once it makes sense and you don't have interest in it. Like I have a funny story to share on this. I used to love Dandiya. Like Dandiya was like a big thing for me. In the Middle East, Dandiya is not like how it's done in Gujarat. Like there was no Gujarati music. It's just Bollywood music. It's like a party. So when I was in school, I used to love going for that because it was the one time my parents would have loved me because it's like a safe setting. And when I was in college, I'd go for it as well. But when I started getting more serious in my chanting, I just lost interest. It was like overnight I lost interest. And my parents were so concerned. Like, how did you lose interest overnight? Like, they were legit concerned, like, is something wrong with you? Like, when I told them that I'm not interested in going anymore, they were like, what just happened, you know? Like, but then you know, my father kind of bought this thing that you have to really look, why did you lose interest, right? Were you doing it because you were feeling pressured that you didn't want to do, or was it from your heart? And then, you know, when I was like, well, yeah, it's kind of, I just don't feel like going, then it's like, oh, then you'll stick with it. Then you'll never feel the desire to go for something that, so it's kind of like when you go in a different direction, I think the other things naturally go away, and or they reduce, maybe not go away, but reduce, right? And I think it comes with time.
Mataji, if I can add into this conversation, I remember in Amarendra Prabhu's class, Prabhuji mentioned, right, and sometimes when we tell kids, don't do this, it's not going to work. We go to replace it with something else, like, you know, I mean, anything, even it works for everyone as well. If any human being, you tell them, don't do this, it's not going to work. We go to replace it with something else, which is favorable to Krishna consciousness.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those are beautiful points. Also,
Can I
to
ask
add one more thing, Mataji, Prabhu, can I add one more point before?
Sure, please.
Sorry, yes.
No, good.
Because I'll forget this, but because Mataji shared something personal and that helped her, I also remembered something. Because I was right out of 12th grade. I don't know the US terminologies, but I was right out of 12th grade. It was the first year of my engineering. I was probably 16, 17. And that is when, around the time I met devotees. That is the peak time of, you know, trying to get into sense, you know, enjoyment of the world and, you know, try to do different things. And when I became devotee, what transformed me, like I remember, so we had two satellite centers around the college. It was a huge campus. So on one end of the campus we had one center, and at the other end of the campus we had another center. And the prasadam facility was at the other center. So, and I lived in the other center. And you know, it's India, we have to come up with different jugards to, you know, make sure that everything is done. So with all the little money that we had, we got this little, you know, this cycle that in India there are these dudwala people, you know, they call it Ghoda cycle. It's a black cycle, and it's usually these people who are, you know, out on the road delivering food. Those are the people who, you know, ride those bikes. And I am here. I just joined this base, and still haven't given up all those previous inclinations and tendencies. And in college you want to look cool and act cool. I remember going from one center to the other center on that cycle, and every time a girl from my class would go, I was like, oh my god. Right? But then that was the hard part. But then I would always remember the love and the care and the affection and the association of the devotees that I was living with. And that overpowered everything else for me. So even as our devotee children are growing up, their association, their bonding, their relationships, the love and care, you know, with the devotee kids around them, with the community around them, is going to be a very important factor in you know, in directing them towards what path to take. So I just thought of sharing, you know, that was one thing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you. Actually, I think these 2 points really, you know, I really like them, Prabhuji, the entertainment versus enlightenment. I think that's going to stay with me. And then the other one you just said, that the, you know, love, care and affection of where you lived, that overpower everything. I think that is something as a parent, for me to kind of work on, and finding that right balance, like you said, that we can judge a child to child because we are all unique, and like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, so it's not a cookie cutter remedy for everyone. So thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Sakshi Garanga Prabhu, and then after that, Vaman Hari Prabhu had a question and comment as well. So Sakshi Garanga Prabhu, Mridakshi Mataji, and then we'll go to Vaman Hari Prabhu.
Okay, thank you, Mataji. Prabhuji, thank you so much for a very nice class. Very, very good. Lot of tips in that as well. So, Prabhuji, I wanted to pick your brain on things. The ideas that you mentioned, the steps. They're very simple but difficult to implement. At least for me, lot of times. So, can you share some, based on your journey, based on your experience, certain tips and guidance on how do we implement those steps and improve on things?
Which particular thing, Prabhu, are you referring to? Otherwise, I'll repeat the entire lecture again.
No, I mean, you mentioned certain actions and the steps and all those, right?
The
we should
acronym.
always, yeah, the things you mentioned, things are very simple but difficult to implement, right?
Right.
So, based on your experience, things which have worked for you, maybe if you like to share some certain things.
Okay. Let me think. I'm going to just trying to go flashback, rectify or right your wrongs. Okay. I remember a small, simple example of right your wrongs that was affecting me way back when I began Krishna consciousness. So my parents and my family's understanding of me was always that our boy is affected by the people he goes around with, and they would always try to divert me from wrong company. But when I came in contact with the devotees as well, they became really worried, because the image of Krishna conscious people is like, okay, these people are going to become just give up everything and become weird. So also my sister was not convinced that I'm a changed person. So I still am not a good person, but I had these habits, and siblings fight, and they know you in and out. They know where you are right, where you are wrong, what you do, what you say, whether you are acting, whether you are actually truly mean what you say. So when I became a devotee, she also had an opinion that he's just it's just a small something that will pass, it won't stay for long. And I became really averse to television in our house, and we would have fights about it. And I would not let her, sometimes play songs, or she wasn't connected. Only I was connected to devotees. And one day we had a terrible argument about it, and she started getting angry, and I started getting angry, and all of a sudden, all the anger, the resurgence of all unearthers, my anger became strong, and so strong I was yelling at the top of my lungs, and I remember the entire entrance could if they were actually paying attention, they could have heard our conversation. I was yelling at the top of my lungs, and I couldn't control my anger. And so she just put the remote away. She just went inside, and instantly I felt like, what did I just do? This is not right. And just around that time, I had heard a lecture from my Guru Maharaj, and the topic of that lecture was art of tolerance. And I was scratching my head because I just did not act tolerant, right? And one of the things in that he actually made us repeat thrice was, one's greatness must be estimated by one's ability to tolerate provoking situations. And I was like, why did I do that? So all I could do was think of, okay, I need to fix this. It just came automatically, right? I went and I just literally, touched her feet. I had never done that in my life, because it was all new. But I just went and touched her feet. She cried, I cried, and everything was gone. She melted, I melted, And that was one of the transformative, moments in my family, for them also to become Krishna conscious. Like, this person has genuinely accepted, right? So that was something I was thinking about. If we rectify our wrongs, we actually clear a lot of hurdles that we have created, through our actions, and we can, move on. So there are so many wrongs that we do, right? But the most important wrongs are following, the regulated principles, right? And if we have actually broken them, we should try to fix. We should try to maybe do some extra rounds to repent for those, and to never actually go back to those things again. Embarking on a journey to actually, those are just like principles in as such. Trying to recollect what other if there are devotees on the call who would like to share their personal examples about something, please feel free. Doesn't have to be me only. What are the other things? Postponing sense gratification is actually, I think we talked about that. Like, there are a lot of things we can do. Uh, However, all these points are all dependent upon our association. The stronger community bonding that we have, the stronger these principles will be, for us in our lives. And what else? Yeah, Prabhu, maybe we can talk more offline. If I recollect some more things, we can talk. But those are the things I'm trying to, remember right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But if there was a specific point, Prabhuji or Mataji, like you had that you wanted to share, like was there a specific thing that you wanted more details on?
Yeah, Prabhuji, can you share something about chanting? Like, how do you improve chanting? Right.
Wow.
I mean, like.
Okay. We will have another seminar until 3 p.m. But Prabhu,
Yeah.
honestly, I can share. There are books written about that, Prabhu. There is Japa Reform book. Sachinandan Maharaj does amazing holy name lectures. Recently, even Baldev Prabhu gave a lecture on a two-part lecture on improving chanting. I was also listening to. I have some more recordings of Gaur Gopal Prabhu on the holy name. There's one more brahmachari in our temple. His name is Sudama Prabhu, and he gives amazing lectures on the holy name. He himself chants 64 rounds daily, and his practice is from his example. So I can share those, and maybe
Oh,
we
that
can.
would be, yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. And then Vaman Hari Prabhu.
Krishna Mataji, thank you, Kanhai Gopal Prabhu, for the nice class. My question has already been addressed by Mahasundari Mataji, Lalita Madhavi Mataji, and Sakshi Gauranga Prabhu about the postponing the sense gratification. Still, I have a small comment. If we somehow, suppose I want to eat gulab jamuns or go on a vacation or watch a football game, if somehow I postpone it and for a while and keep postponing those things, slowly we may lose interest in those things. Any thoughts on that?
Right, Prabhu. So postponing sense gratification will not completely resolve our problems, because the next point of that is to actually urgently pick up Krishna consciousness. Simply postponing sense gratification today and not adding on to our Krishna consciousness as well will mean that tomorrow the desire for sense gratification will be more vicious, and day after tomorrow it will be even more vicious, and day after that it will be even more vicious, and the day after that we'll just abandon Krishna consciousness and go back to what we were doing before we became devotees. The idea is to also add the principle of Krishna consciousness and strengthen those principles to such a degree that we actually don't have the need to postpone sense gratification.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Because of Krishna consciousness, I don't have time to go on vacation, or I don't have time to do other things.
Right.
That's how slowly we lose interest in the other things,
Right.
as we are strengthening, as you rightly said, our Krishna consciousness.
Useful. But again, one has to decide based on Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra what qualifies as sense gratification and what qualifies as recreation, and then act accordingly in a way that one's Krishna consciousness is not hampered.
Can I go forward? Actually, when you were sharing this, it just reminded me of a class I had heard long time back by His Holiness Bhakti Brihad Bhagavad Swami. And he actually said exactly what you said here, that when we urgently focus on Krishna, our sense gratification gets addressed. And Maharaj gave a really nice analogy, as hopefully I remember it accurately. But Maharaj was giving an example that, say you choose to go watch a movie instead of coming for the Sunday program. Like, he took that as the analogy where you have a choice. And then he said that actually if you are progressing in your Krishna consciousness, and you're not like generally you're a devotee, but you have this one desire to go. He says one of the three things will happen. One is that circumstance, you go to watch the movie, but the movie is really bad, and then you'll actually feel like, why did I just waste my time coming here, because the movie is so bad. So it's like I could have rather been at the temple. He said another circumstance can happen is that you end up going there, but you realize that, oh, this is the wrong day. Like I shouldn't have, like I just had the wrong date in my calendar. So something happens. And he said the third is Krishna will make the circumstance so unfavorable for you to go there that you just cannot go there. And Maharaj like made like this point that maybe there'll be like a storm will come right where the movie theater is, and you just cannot go there. So but then he was kind of making this point that actually when you think about Krishna, even when you want to do something that's not favorable, Krishna actually sets the scene for you where you cannot, not you don't want to go, you cannot go there. So it's not like you still have the desire to go watch the movie, still desire sense gratification, but the circumstance is not favorable for you anymore. So your answer just reminded me of that point that Maharaj had made. It's really nice, very, you can relate to that a lot.
I think one more comment on the postponing the sense gratification. Can we apply that principle when our spouse tells us to do something?
Depends what your spouse tells you, right, Prabhu?
Seriously.
Yeah, exactly, Prabhu. That not only spouse, Prabhu. That's another question I was having. Like, postponing for the self that's okay. We may try to control ourselves, but sometimes, like we are in a family life and we have to oblige our kids or wives some request, and that's why we are also taking part, and we cannot postpone our things. We can try to control and postpone, but the sense gratification of our kids or wife, we cannot. So in this situation, Prabhuji, so is it likely to fulfill the sense gratification first and then concentrate, because the mind will be always bogging you like, okay, you need to do, and we are trying to avoid that one. And likely you mentioned, instead of like fulfilling the like concentrating on Krishna consciousness, we may completely try to avoid and go towards more into the sense gratification mode. Or is it likely like we first fulfill our wish and then concentrate with full force on the Krishna consciousness, or not?
Oh, wow, that's a heavy question. Okay, first of all, Prabhu, again, this is beyond my maturity to comment on how to deal with kids. Even I've only been married for 2.5 years, so still immature there. But some principles I'm trying to think of is number one is that one should have standards. And those standards should be very clearly set with your spouse and with the kids. It is okay to say no if it doesn't hurt their well-being or their mental state. But again, the question is so broad because there are so many things in sense gratification. Maybe we can talk offline and talk about specifics. But the principle is that one should have certain set standards of Krishna consciousness that one is never willing to compromise with. And one first time we say no, it can be frustrating for others. I remember when I was in college, bachelors in Mumbai, we had an engineer. It was a huge campus, and our building was right next to the dental college. And so in India, you get a paid seat admission. So we would have the daughters of richest industrialists, paying lakhs of rupees to get a seat in there, right? The goal of anybody coming in my college was actually to try to, get the favor of one of the girls from there, and one of our biggest challenges was whenever that, people would come, how do we explain this principle and how do we actually, take them progressively on the path of Krishna consciousness? So the first time you tell no to someone, it is frustrating, right? But if the person on the other end is sincere, they will come back looking for a solution, maybe trying to negotiate with you, right? But once you say no, the second time you say no, and when we explain that these are the standards that we need to follow in our lives to make our lives better, and when we ourselves are not miserable following those standards, right? If we are miserable following those standards and someone comes to us asking us to compromise those standards, we both will jump into the ditch. But if we are happy, if we are satisfied and experiencing joy in the practice of those principles, of those standards, we can uplift them. They will also hold a respect for us in their hearts that this person will not compromise. And from our example, they will actually have to take the step upwards. So we should bring ourselves down in terms of our, strictness or too much harshness in words or dealings, yet compromising our principles that we have made for ourselves, at least to practice, right? We have to, Krishna consciousness is practiced at an individual level and at a collective level. But we all have those individual commitments to our Guru, to our Parampara, to the Supreme Lord. And if we compromise those, then we ourselves will be miserable. At the same time, the mind derives a split second of satisfaction in breaking our principles. But at the end of the whole thing, everyone is miserable. But on the other hand, if we are actually truly, genuinely, practicing our principles, the end result of the other way, going the other way, is that everyone becomes happy. But that is gradual. That is difficult. But it is possible because I have known and seen devotees who do that. And based on their example, I'm not the person who does that, so please forgive me. But I'm just sharing the principle that is actually, that works. And that has worked in the lives of devotees. I hope this helps. I don't know if I confused you or helped you.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it helps to some extent, Prabhu, but it always depends upon the other people level of understanding. If they are willing to cooperate, that's fine. If they are not willing to cooperate, then the situation, because I have seen heard couple of devotees in India, they got divorced because it's all a cooperative thing, and that's if the principle they understand and they come to that level, they uplift them, that's fine. If that understanding is not there, then the problem is ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, relationships is all about mutual understanding.
Right. And it's not a single person striving, but it's a collective movement when you are in a family life, and each one of them are cooperating, then really it becomes wonderful in the service of Krishna. But otherwise, it's really becomes, for the self also, it becomes tough to progress in certain situations. Thank you, Prabhu.
May I add something to this?
Yes.
All the answers are correct, but the main thing that whenever we are faced with situations, we always think that, how am I going to solve this? What should I do? Instead, one should think that, oh, Krishna, please help me. And when we do that, we get the right answers. We are able to answer the opposite party. And about the kids and all that, we have to be a little lenient also, because we have to place ourselves in their mind frame. And just like earlier, Mataji, Lalita Mataji was saying, that is all true. We have to be a little bit lenient, try to understand their situation, try to understand the kind of friends they're going to meet, and how are they going to deal with them. So it is the uphill battle. It's not that simple. Krishna consciousness is not a simple thing. It is an uphill battle. And every time we are faced with situations, Krishna is really testing us that is he going to ask me, just like the case where Krishna was waiting for what's in the Mahabharata, when that devotee is going to turn towards me for asking for help, or is that person going to just do by herself? So Krishna is looking for us depending on him, okay? But we, out of our millions and millions of births, we have this nature of I am going to solve it. I am going to solve it. I have the power. I have the intelligence. It doesn't work that way. We have to be surrendered to Krishna. We have to say that Krishna, this is beyond me. Please help me. And if we do that at every instance, then that is how we become surrendered. It's an uphill battle. It may take us maybe more than a couple of lifetimes to get to that point, but we have to keep in mind that he is in charge, he is in control. Everything goes according to his sanction. Nothing is going to go according to the way we think. So we have to take his shelter. So that's my few words on that.
Yeah,
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for such a beautiful thought-provoking class, Prabhuji. It's triggering so many beautiful thoughts, and we are having these wonderful discussions. I have a question. Prabhuji, like you shared some points from Srila Prabhupada's purport from Srimad-Bhagavatam 1.9.27. It says, to be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans. So what is the proper way to understand this, Prabhuji? Like, should we understand this along the lines of postponing sense gratification, meaning like postpone our plans to enjoy those unlawful desires? Is that the right way to understand it?
Yeah, that is the correct understanding, Prabhu. One way to look at it also is that to understand difference between papa and aparadha. Papa is unknowingly when someone does a sinful activity, right? But aparadha is actually when we know something and yet we do it, right? That is one understanding of aparadha, which means to not make plans to do things that are actually forbidden, which are unlawful. The word is literally unlawful, which to me, it literally refers to the 4 regulative principles. So, and it is natural for, like Srila Prabhupada, I was listening to one lecture of Srila Prabhupada, and he was mentioning that it is natural for a conditioned soul to seek these things. Because if Krishna is not in the picture, it is natural for a conditioned soul to think these things. And when we become devotees, all of those things just don't disappear in a day or two. Those desires are still there, right? But one should not make plans to satisfy those desires, because that is when we get into the trap of that guilt and hypocrisy, and start going in a loop, falling and getting up and falling and getting up, falling and getting up. It is very frustrating. So that is where I think, and then it also connects with, okay, let's just postpone it. I had this, but okay, we'll think about it some other day. Let me try to, everything about Krishna consciousness is doing what you can, and by doing what you can, you ultimately achieve the strength, because Krishna gives, like Vaikunteshwar Balaji Prabhu pointed out very nicely, that one should turn towards Krishna for the strength. By doing what we can, we get the strength to ultimately be able to do things that we cannot. At this current moment in our life, it might be very difficult to follow the regulative principles. It may be very difficult to follow the regulations of bhakti. But if we do what we can you chant one round? You know, for someone, it is like someone who's starting, one round is all they can do. By chanting one round, they get the strength to do two rounds. By continuously doing that, they can gradually elevate themselves. It's just like going to the gym, Prabhu. Can you just run a mile? You know, just get on the treadmill, you know, just start doing a mile. Then you go for 2 miles, then you go for 3 miles. And before you know, you could be doing a marathon. But if you have to be committed to consistently doing what you can, right? And by doing that, we can achieve the strength to, you know, to avoid those things, right? But I think this connects with those points, Prabhu. I don't know if that helps.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanhai Gopal Prabhu, and all the devotees for participating in this lively conversation. I feel like just the P of your pure is a whole class by itself, Prabhu, on postponement of sense gratification. So hopefully we can actually dwell deeper into that topic in future classes. But thank you so much, Kanhai Gopal Prabhu, again for sharing such a wonderful, simple class and principles that we can all apply in our daily lives. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you.